Hello all. So as a part of our lecture series in transmission and distribution, in this video we are going to see about the transmission towers, its types and design and parts. So in the previous video, we discussed about the mechanical design of a transmission line. So now we are going to know about the types of the towers. So may I know what is a tower in the transmission and distribution? So without a tower, a transmission line cannot be traveled from one place to another. So that is what we call it as a tower. So this is another important parameter before we design a transmission system. So in this video, we are going to have about what is transmission tower and transmission tower parts. So in the picture, it clearly shows what is a transmission tower. So without this, the transmission is not at all possible. So here H1, H2 and H3, H4 are the heights between the ground and the first transmission and the second. So that is what is mentioned as H1, H2, H3 and H4. So first of all, what is a transmission tower? So a transmission tower is a tall structure used to support the overhead transmission line. So this is the main part to support the transmission line. So these also used to carry high voltage transmission lines to support bulk electric power from generating stations to the electrical substations. So in general, from the generating station, the power is transferred to a substation, and from the substation, it is transferred to the distribution side and to the customers. So these utility poles are used to support lower voltage subtransmission and distribution lines to transport power from substation to the electrical consumers. So the tower, which we call it as from generating station to the electrical substation, we call it as transmission tower. Whereas from the distribution side, we call it as poles. So it has to carry the heavy transmission conductors as a sufficient safe height from the ground. So the transmission tower design is an important engineering work where civil, mechanical and electrical engineering concepts are equally applicable. So coming to the transmission tower parts. So it is a long structure which we see, but it has different parts also. So the following are the parts of the tower. The peak of the transmission tower, the cross arm of the transmission tower, the boom of the transmission tower, cage of the transmission tower, and the overall thing we call it as transmission tower body, and leg of transmission tower, and another one is anchor bolt assembly. So from the names itself, we can judge what may be it. So the peak is always we tell the peak as the topest value. So see, in this picture, we can clearly see the peak of the transmission tower. So the portion above the top cross arm is called as the peak of the transmission tower. So generally, earth shield wire is connected to the tip of this peak. So in the whole transmission line, this topmost part, cone-shaped part, we call it as peak of the transmission tower. Coming to the cross arm of the transmission tower. So the cross arms are, so for example, in this transmission tower, we have 3 cross arms, which is highlighted in red color. So the dimension of the cross arms depends on the level of the transmission voltage, configuration and minimum forming angle. So this cannot be designed as it is. So it should have a proper angle. So in order to transmit that particular level of voltage. So this is the cross arm of the transmission tower. Coming to the cage of the transmission tower. So the portion between the tower body and the peak is known as the cage of the transmission tower. So this portion of the tower holds the cross arms. So this portion of the tower holds the cross arms. So this portion plays a vital role in maintaining required ground clearance of the bottom conductor of the transmission line. So ground clearance is nothing but what is the height which we have to maintain from the ground level, base level to the first transmission line. So this has to be maintained in order to prevent damages or in order to prevent accidents. So it should not be in an accessible part because we are going to transfer a very high kilovolts in this transmission towers. So coming to the important points that has to be remembered, the minimum ground clearance of the lowest conductor point above the ground level, the length of the insulator string which we have to maintain, and the minimum clearance to be maintained between the conductor and the towers. The location of the ground wire with respect to outermost conductor has to be maintained, and the midspan clearance required from considerations of dynamic behavior of the conductor and lightning protection of the power line. So these are all the important points that we have to remember when we plan to design a tower to carry a very high voltage from generating station to the substations. So coming to the assessment part, transposition of conductors is done to save the conductor, increase stability, to have equality in the parameters, to interchange values of voltage of current at other end. So the transposition of conductors is done to have equality in the line parameters. So what is the purpose of ground wire placed on the top of the tower in the transmission line? It is to protect the line against the over voltages. It is to protect the line against the over voltages. The leakage current in the transmission line is referred to as conductance, which we have already seen in the video. So we will meet in the another video. Thank you.